the fundamental mistake of all of the policy of Israel toward its own defense and the United States in alliance with Israel since the 1970s has been to discount even the possibility that there could be people in the world who actually think that there is an insurmountable hostility and hatred, that there is a hostility and hatred that is divinely commanded that cannot ever be ended because it comes from God. And so there is absolutely no way you can sit down at a table and come to some kind of reconciliation, peace, and cooperation that will allow both groups to live in peace. You have hostility and hatred forever. I have an old book, The Palestinian Delusion, The Catastrophic History of the Middle East Peace Process. I took a few notes this morning that are from that book to explain what we're dealing with these days. So I wanted to give you a quote. This is a quote. I'll tell you who said it after I read it. No longer are we necessarily a people who dwells alone, and no longer is it true that the whole world is against us. We must overcome the sense of isolation that has held us in its thrall for almost half a century. We must join the international movement towards peace, reconciliation, and cooperation that is spreading all over the entire globe these days, lest we be the last to remain all alone at the station. Who said it? Close. Yitzhak Rabin said it, the Prime Minister of Israel in 1992, as he was about to conclude the Oslo Accords with Yasser Arafat. Now, I submit that that is a quote, a statement that is diametrically opposed to the spirit of another Prime Minister of Israel. As a matter of fact, Yitzhak Rabin's predecessor in his first term as Prime Minister, Golda Meir, who said very famously, if we have a choice between being dead and pitied and being alive with a bad image, we'd rather be alive and have the bad image. Now, what Yitzhak Rabin was saying and what happened at the Oslo Accords was exactly the opposite. It was opting to be dead and pitied, essentially. But what he was doing was obviously not that explicitly. He was saying, we have to join the international community and not be isolated anymore and join the international movement towards peace. Now, what is the fallacy in what he was saying? It is that it was not because of Israel's actions that Israel was isolated and not part of the international movement towards peace. What we have are fundamentally opposed views of the world that cannot possibly be reconciled. And one of them is the idea that the world is progressing in a positive direction, and that it's kind of an inevitable progression, which is a Marxist idea, toward a wonderful culmination of a society that is completely at peace and equitable and just. And that's the Marxist idea. You have to spill a lot of blood to get there, but ultimately you get to the dictatorship of the proletariat, and then the state fades away, and there's true communism, and everything is okay. Now, if you believe that, then you believe that you can sit down with anyone and settle your problems. But then you come up against people who believe in something else. And so I give you a quotation from the Quran, the holy book of Islam, which speaks about Abraham. And you might think, isn't that nice that it speaks about Abraham? See, we're all Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and we all have Abraham in common. He is our common father, and we are all his children, and we can build bridges on that basis. And if you think that sounds fatuous, you're right, except that's what George W. Bush said, and Barack Obama, and certainly Joe Biden in his more lucid moments. There is no dissenting voice, essentially, from the idea that we can build the same kind of common ground that Yitzhak Rabin was talking about on the basis of the shared the shared areas of our three religious faiths. However, when you look at Abraham in the Quran, it tells you in chapter 3, verse 67, that Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian. Abraham was a Muslim. Now, you might wonder, how is it that Abraham could be a Muslim when Abraham lived hundreds and hundreds of years before Muhammad? Well, the Islamic scheme, in the Islamic understanding, the original religion of all the prophets was Islam. Abraham taught Islam, Moses taught Islam. They were all Muslims. John the Baptist taught Islam. Jesus taught Islam. Every last one of them was a Muslim. And then what happened? They had bad followers, and their bad followers twisted their teachings to create what we know of as Judaism and Christianity. So they are false, twisted, hijacked versions of the original Islamic teachings of the prophets. So while the Judeo-Christian tradition is full of leaders who will say we have this wonderful Abrahamic faith commonality, the vision of Abraham in Islam is rejectionist in an absolute sense. And that is, we are the true children of Abraham and you all are not. And what does that mean in practice? There's another passage, chapter 60, verse 4, and it has Abraham telling his father, because remember, Abraham's a Muslim and his father is not. His father is a polytheist. And so Abraham says, there has arisen hostility and hatred between us forever until you believe in Allah alone. So there has arisen hostility and hatred between us forever until you believe in Allah alone. Think about that and compare that to we must join the international movement towards peace. How are you going to do that when you have some people who think there is hostility and hatred between us forever because you do not share the religion that I have? And so the fundamental mistake of all of the policy of Israel toward its own defense and the United States in alliance with Israel since the 1970s has been to discount even the possibility that there could be people in the world who actually think that there is an insurmountable hostility and hatred, that there is a hostility and hatred that is divinely commanded that cannot ever be ended because it comes from God. And so there is absolutely no way you can sit down at a table and come to some kind of reconciliation, peace, and cooperation that will allow both groups to live in peace. You have hostility and hatred forever. Now, what is the chief state, aside from Hamas and Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and all the rest of them, what is the main state that is against Israel today? Iran. Now, that in itself ought to give you the understanding right away that all the analysis you hear about this conflict from the State Department and from the United Nations and from everybody else on the planet, except me, is wrong, is the fact that Iran is Israel's chief enemy. Why? Because look on a map. How does Israel threaten Iran? Why on earth would Iran, which has been where it is for thousands of years and does not have a border with Israel, how is it threatened by this tiny Jewish state that is several nations away? You got Syria, and you've got Jordan, and you've got Lebanon in between, essentially kind of in between, in the neighborhood. So why on earth does Iran have such hostility and hatred towards Israel? Because Iran is an Islamic republic. When Iran was not an Islamic republic, it was not hostile towards Israel. When Iran was ruled by the Shah, the Ayatollah Khomeini was trying to overthrow the Shah in the 1960s and 70s. And the Ayatollah Khomeini said an interesting thing. He said, Israel does not want the Quran to be in this country. Israel does not want the rules of Islam to be in this country. Now, this is insane, but think about it. Try to understand what on earth is going on here. Why would Khomeini blame Israel when he's got the Shah right there who has westernized his country and secularized it and de-emphasized Islam and the Quran? Why would Khomeini reach out and say it's Israel's fault? Because the Shah, for whatever else he was still a Muslim. So he was a bad Muslim. He was an apostate or a hypocrite or whatever you want to call him, but he was still within the fold. Whereas Israel, they know there is hostility and hatred between them forever. And so if there is a country that is trying to destroy Islam in Iran, well, it's got to be Israel. Because after all, there's another passage of the Quran, chapter 5, verse 82, which says that you will find that those who have the greatest hatred for you are the Jews. In other words, the Jews are specified in the Quran as the foremost enemies of the Muslims. So Ayatollah Khomeini is trying to figure out what happened to my wonderful Islamic Iran. Why is it not Islamic anymore? Oh, it's Israel's fault. Well, who else? They're the worst enemies of the Muslims. There's hostility and hatred between them and the Muslims forever. And so that's that. As far as he's concerned, that is enough for Israel to be responsible for the Shah's regime, and then for Israel to become the foremost enemy of Khomeini's regime. It all has to do with Islam. There is no other explanation for it. You cannot say, well, Israel stole Iran's land. Well, Israel has colonized and oppressed Iran. Israel has done this or that. No, the only reason why Iran cares about what's happening or allegedly happening with the Palestinians is because of Islam, because of the solidarity of the Islamic Ummah, the worldwide Islamic community. Now, this is extremely dangerous also because Iran is a Shiite state. There are Sunnis and there are Shiites. The Sunnis are about 85 to 90% of the Muslims in the world. The Shiites are Iran. And Bahrain, which Iran claims as the 15th province of Iran, and Iraq, which is 55% Shiite. And then there's 10% Shiites in Saudi Arabia and Shiites in Lebanon, but primarily you have Iran in a world of Sunnis that is essentially hostile to it. But the Iranians have ambitions. They would like to overcome the Sunnis and become the leaders of the Islamic world. And how could they do that when they're so vastly outnumbered? Well, they're working on it. They have Iraq now, which, as I said, has a Shiite majority. For years, the Syrian regime was a client state of Iran. Now that's a little bit in flux. The Assad regime is Alawite. Alawites are an offshoot of Shiite Islam. The Iranians are Twelver Shiites. That's the main form of Shiites, but there are a lot of different Shiites. And the Alawites are a Shiite group that is about 12% of Syria, but they rule the country, and they are propped up by the support from Iran, although the relations have been straining lately. Then you have Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is a wholly owned and operated subsidiary of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And then you have Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad that are Sunni, that Iran is funding. And if you look at a map, you're getting to have this entire, a kind of crescent, as it were, of Shiite hegemony that could result in the Shiites, if they destroy Israel, which of course they want to do, becoming the foremost Islamic power in the world, far surpassing all the Sunni states, and overcoming any challenge from Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Turkey to be the leader of the Islamic world, because they're the ones who destroyed Israel. And when they're playing this game, it's very dangerous because of Shiite theology. Shiite theology is a theology of loss and defeat, paradoxically enough, because the Shiites were always a minority in Islam. And in Islam, you got a problem? Kill. You got a dispute? Kill. You got a domestic argument? Hit her. Violence is the key to the whole thing. You have a problem, you solve it by violence. Terror is the key to the whole thing. You have a death penalty for apostasy. You have the wife beating that I just mentioned. You have the amputation for theft, stoning for adultery, all these different penalties that are designed to terrify people into staying in line. The whole core of Islam is terror. It's not just a bug, it's a feature. It's core to the thing itself. Like you could say Christianity is a religion of love. If that is true, Islam is a religion of terror. It's not just about the terrorism. The whole thing is based on fear, that you get too frightened to disobey. Now, the problem with that is that when the Shia are living with the Sunnis, they are getting killed quite a bit. And the Shia idea is that that in the first place, that Muhammad appointed Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was his son-in-law, to be his successor. And the Sunnis say, no, he didn't. And that the leader of the Muslim community has to be a descendant of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So there were 12 of those, and they were known as the Imams. In Sunni Islam, the Imam is like your local parish priest or rabbi or whatever. But in Shiite Islam, the Imam is the infallible guide of the community and the successor of Ali and Muhammad. And so the successor of Ali and Muhammad, most of them were killed by the Sunnis. And then in the year 869, this 5-year-old kid became the Imam. because it was a hereditary thing. You have to be in Ali's household. So in 874, he disappeared. He was probably murdered by the Sunnis, but nobody knows. He vanished. And the Shiite idea is that he's still alive. He could be here. And he's hiding until the day when the Muslims are persecuted more fiercely than they have ever been persecuted before. And then he will reappear. And this is something that is fervently believed by the hierarchy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, what if you have this idea? By the way, when he comes back, he's going to save everything. He's the savior figure, the 12th Imam, the hidden Imam. He's going to just wait, you know? When he gets here, you're all going to get it. And then the world will be at peace because everybody will be dead or Shiite. So they're waiting for this consummation of all things that's going to come from this 5-year-old who's going to come back and lay waste and establish the victory of the Shiites. But he's only going to come back when you are in a persecution that is more severe than you have ever endured before, you the Muslims. So what could that be? A nuclear strike. What if, for example, the Islamic Republic of Iran sends nukes to Israel and Israel retaliates? The president of Iran from 1989 to 97, Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, he said application of a nuclear bomb would not leave anything in Israel, but the same thing would just produce damages in the Muslim world. In other words, we can take this. We don't care. How could he say that he wouldn't mind? It would just produce damage. Damage. He's talking about 10 to 15 million people dead in Iran. How could he say, oh, that's okay. We could endure that. Because that would bring the kid back. The 12th Imam would return because the Muslims are so persecuted. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the former president of another former president of Iran, used to go to this well where the hidden Imam was hiding, and he would talk to him. And I say that to tell you how seriously this is all taken. It may sound crazy, but this is believed very fervently by the people who are in charge in Iran. And so, if they send a nuclear bomb to Israel, then what they envision is that Israel will be destroyed, Iran will be victorious, the Sunni states will have to accept the hegemony of Iran over the world, over the Islamic world, and then they will be able to proceed to wage jihad against the rest of the world in order to bring it under the hegemony of Islam as well. Because ultimately this is a maximalist vision. I expect you likely are aware of that, but I'll just make sure. Chapter 8, verse 39 of the Quran says, them, until persecution is no more, and the religion is all for Allah. So see, if you fight them until persecution is no more, well, that's not so bad. Then if we just stop persecuting them, then everything will be okay. But then there's the second part of the passage, and religion is all for Allah. So if there's any religion that's not for Allah in the world, they got to keep fighting. And so this is the fundamental fallacy in what Yitzhak Rabin said, that we must join the international movement towards peace, reconciliation, and cooperation that is spreading all over the entire globe these days. It ain't. It wasn't then, and it isn't now. There was never a movement for peace, reconciliation, and cooperation in the Islamic world. It was always about subjugation, submission, and the Islamic hegemony. And this brings us to the even larger picture that what we have here is an enormous struggle between collectivism and the dignity of the individual. Collectivism is Marxist as well as Islamic. In Islam, this is why they love each other. In Islam, you have to join the ummah, and the rights of the ummah are much more important than your individual life. We see this all the time. I have stories at Jihad Watch on this practically every day. Brothers kill sister for not wearing hijab. Now, how could they do that? How could they value her adherence to Islam more than her life itself, such that her life is absolutely worthless if she doesn't adhere to Islam, because it's all about the collective. You're either in the Islamic group or you're absolutely worthless and your life is forfeit. You have to conform to all, and people have often noted that there's a great deal of hypocrisy in the Islamic world because of the death penalty for apostasy and because of the stifling social order. There's a lot that goes on behind closed doors, particularly in Iran. You know, there's a whole culture that people have written about in the West from time to time. Young people in particular, of course, and they're wearing the hijabs, and they go to the mosque, and they say their prayers, and then they go to somebody's apartment, and they turn out all the lights, and they lock all the doors, and then comes the tequila, and the dancing, and the hijabs go off, and then the party's over, and the hijab goes back on, and they go back out to the mosque. Now, this is the idea, really, that all you have to do is adhere to the collective, which they do, and you don't have to go along with it in your head, in your heart, in your mind. You just have to submit. And Marxism is much the same way. The Marxists don't really care. We just have to go along and not make waves about it. We just have to get it to show our submission. Both Marxism and Islam are all about the collective and submission to the collective. And so they have this magnificent alliance. And I'll conclude just by saying that there is hope amid all this because of the cracks in the alliance. And they are, in the first place, the difficulties between the Sunni and the Shia, that Iran has this wonderful plan to destroy Israel and become the leader of the Islamic world. Well, Turkey and Egypt and Saudi Arabia do have a lot to say about that. And then, as I noted yesterday, if you were around, the biggest foes right now on the ground at the grassroots level of the LGBTQ madness are Muslim groups, when they've been allies all this time. And as I said yesterday, don't be fooled by this into thinking, oh, now we can be pals. And there will be a wonderful coalition of social conservatives with the Muslims and the conservative Jews and Christians. Remember, hostility and hatred between us forever. I didn't say it. It's in the Holy Book of Islam.
It's 2025. America's debt is over $37 trillion, and the dollar just had its worst crash since 1973. That puts your savings and your family's future at risk. That's why we trust Alpha Omega Gold, a company that stands unapologetically with Israel and supports Stand Tall Israel. Visit ao.gold/stand to claim your free precious metals wayfinder guide or call 1-855-426-4653 today. Protect your future before it's too late.